So how's everybody doing?
It's not bad.
Not bad.
I'm not dead yet.
Not dead
It's a
yet.
little bit Monday.
It's another what? Another Monday?
Yeah.
I got a robot vacuum cleaner on Friday, and then we got a dog on Sunday. Like it's been a roller coaster. I've not decided which one I like best yet, but no, I'm joking.
What kind of dog did you get?
I don't know. It's a it's a sort of mixed breed of possibly a what's it called, like a it's not a piccolo, but like it's a smaller dog, like a is it like padillo or something like that? Like it's like a smaller, like
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
I think it's like a mix between that. Well, the woman so my sister is a social worker, and one of her clients couldn't keep the dog anymore because she was moving to a place that didn't allow dogs, and so the woman who had bred it said it was part that whatever that dog is called again, part what was it? Blue heeler and part the one oh anyway, but I can't see how all those dogs would actually mix together. Like one's like this big, one's like a giant horse dog, and I'm like I don't know. Anyway, it looks like a dachshund kind of with like a different face. I don't know. It's cute, but we've never had a dog before, so I don't know a lot about taking care of them. So it's a lot of a learning experience for me. So.
Are you more of like a cat person?
No, we just never really had pets at all. Like we're lazy, and so that sounded like more responsibility. But it seems like this one was really well behaved and like kind of low maintenance. And we're like, yeah, cool. You can sit on our laps while we watch TV. So yeah, maybe I'll introduce y'all after this week when we're doing more stuff from home. So that is one of the things I wanted to sort of start with. What is the other type of dog? I'm trying to remember. Pit bull. Like is apparently the other one that they said it was. So like one is like a dog that's this big, and one of them's a pit bull. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you bred those two dogs together. I may be wrong about how this whole thing works, but so let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. I can find my screen. There it is. Share this one. So some of you have probably already noticed I made some changes to the schedule based off of what we talked about last class. So I'm going to get rid of that because I was just doing some thinking about how much I'm trying to cram into today, and I don't think I'll get it all in there. So I think we'll extend that into Wednesday. So a couple of things. Again, film is now due this time, Wednesday. I realized that we probably haven't. Did we talk about our final time? Like when our final is?
No, I think you mentioned it in the email, but it would be nice to go over it again.
Yeah, so like really, if I did mention it in the email, that means I looked it up. But I can never remember which classes I've looked it up for. So let me open that up really quick. Yeah, I think I did. So how you can always find out when your finals are going to be, you probably are well aware of this, is like PTSU final exam schedule. And I know you all know kind of how this works. Fall 2020, because it's a 4 credit hour class, we're slotted for 2 time slots. So we're Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 12:35 to 2:35 is when this class goes to. I just assumed you wanted Wednesday as your due date instead of Monday. It's 1:20 to 3:20 on either of those days, so we'll go ahead and do 1:20 to 3:20, and I'll go ahead and put that in here as well. Am I wrong in assuming Wednesday is when you want this due?
No, I mean, I always assume that it's like giving us a later one means like if we want to turn it on Monday, we can.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Okay, so so I think that this works out to where we have one more graded check-in a week from Wednesday. Well, no, the Wednesday before the project is due. So really, what that is I just want to check in with you and give you one last sort of punch of feedback, right? The other thing is that's probably the last time we will officially meet. I don't know if Friday is quote unquote dead day or not. Like it used to be, that was the study day or whatever, where you get that day off to study for.
The way that this semester's been going, I doubt we will get it.
Yeah, so probably what I'll do is I'll still hang out in the Zoom meeting that day if you have any questions. Oh, you know what? No, I don't think I will. So I believe that this is when portfolio will be going on. So really, portfolio review will probably be Thursday and Friday of that week. And usually we do Friday morning, and I'm guessing, and we may be done by noon, but I doubt it. So I may be in that class, but I can still be available if you need to meet later that day or if you need to meet in other times. We can do like sort of impromptu check-ins on those days. So really I have today and Wednesday scheduled for several small lectures I wanted to talk about. One is to try to finish up that the progress, like the splining pass. I want to talk a little bit about GPU rendering in Arnold. And I also wanted to talk about motion capture. So I don't know that I'll get all the motion capture in today. And so if so, I'll push that off till Wednesday. And we'll at least get like the polish pass lecture, which is not going to be me completely polishing a shot, but more me talking about the process for you. And then Wednesday, we'll finish up the motion capture. But who knows? Everything may go smoothly, and I actually get to the motion capture stuff today. I spent a little bit of time over the last week sort of doing some research and figuring out some kind of cool workflows for it. So I know an example is the team that's doing like outside of the dance club shot. You may need some background characters to dance. There's plenty of motion capture clips that you could use for that. Other people may have scenes where they want to add in some motion capture to those extra shots. And that includes sections of the shots you're already blocking out. Let's say you have a long run at the beginning of a shot, right? If you want to use some motion capture on that, you're welcome to. It may just end up being a lecture where you just learn a little bit about what motion capture is and how to use it. And you don't actually implement any of it anyway. But I'd like to at least go over some of it. It feels to me if we have a little extra time, that is a spot in our curriculum that is kind of missing. I try to cover some of it in character animation for the people who are interested in it, but I don't think people get interested in it until they try it. And so we haven't really gone over that much. So the thing I did pencil in here that is a little bit of a change from what we talked about last time is this coming Friday. What I originally wrote in there was go home, which is the day you would go home, I would assume, most people. But I recognize a lot of people aren't. And I wanted to get us a guest speaker to come and chat. I'm going to open this up to other people as well, other classes and other people in just like Edge and stuff like that to invite people to it. But basically during our class time, we're going to get Heather Carpini Harris is going to come and talk to us. I'm currently working with her on a contract project, or we're both working as contractors for a company on a project we can't really talk about. But she's done a lot of animation in sort of film and TV and direct to streaming and video stuff. So I know she worked on may double check myself on that. I think she worked on Horton, Here's a Who. I know she worked on Rock Dog with Rockstar. I'm sorry, not Rockstar. Real Effects, and she worked on some of the Ice Age, like the Ice Age Christmas special and stuff like that. She's an interesting person to talk to, though, because she is working for the most part as a contract animator at different studios.
I don't know if this is like strange to say, but it's really refreshing and kind of relating to having a guest speaker who is in animation who's a woman.
Yes,
I never hear about it.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I actually intentionally try to. I mean, I know in character animation, last semester I tried to get some guest speakers, and I tried to mix it up so it wasn't just a bunch of old white guys talking. Because I do think that diversity, just in general, is it's been an issue that animation and games have had for a while, but it's getting better, and so I like having people come and talk about that as well. So, yeah, she's really interesting, and I think she's pretty excited to chat with y'all. So, what I would say is, try to make it to that. Even if you're just going to listen to it, it's not really going to be a huge participation thing. So if you happen to be on the road, pull over to rest stop when our class starts, open it up on Zoom, and listen to it on your drive or whatever, just so she can, you can be part of that conversation or whatever. It's not going to be super. It's not going to require a lot of you, except for when we want to ask some questions, and for the most part, it's just going to be a chat. And I kind of scheduled that on Friday mainly because it fits into her schedule better. I tried to see if we could do it on a Wednesday, but this works out pretty good because that frees us up to do a lecture here and a lecture here to cover some of those little extraneous, like small things that we talked about in the last class period, like possibly some more scripts, possibly some other techniques or tricks and stuff like that. So, so really what's happening is for the rest of the semester, class time is going to be these small tips and tricks, these small little notes, these small lectures, while you're working, right? I mean, you can be working during class or you can work outside of class or whatever, but there's not a whole lot of project-specific lectures that I have. It's like, oh, next you need to do this and then this. It's more of like, these are things that you can apply to your project or future projects, however benefits that particular situation. The only thing I do have in here is I have one graded check-in that week before, and really that's just, like, I feel like this is the home stretch, right? When you get to this point, that's where you make that final push to get the project finished. And I'd like to see it one more time to be able to give you some feedback on how, like, what areas to improve, right? Okay. So, any questions on this or comments or things you want to chat about? All right, cool.
So, yeah, everyone else seems good. I'm also excited for guest speaker.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she'll be fun. So, okay, cool. I think one of the interesting things about her is, even though not all of her projects are huge feature projects, like Rock Dog was a feature film, but it was it was more like a to video thing. So there isn't a check-in this Wednesday. So I thought about leaving one there. My real question with doing that was there anything that you would benefit from it? So I think what I'll do is I'll try to make sure that there's some free time in there to where we can chat, and we could have an unofficial check-in if you want to. Like, that's a chance for you all to ask for, sort of feedback, or if we want to just have some open question time, that would be a time to do it. But I didn't want to make it an official thing that everybody was trying to hit, mainly because I wasn't able to sort of properly announce that in class until today, and that feels like that just sends you into a tizzy trying to get something ready for that. Instead, I would rather think of it as between here and here, you try to just maintain some like consistent progress. I recognize that nobody's going to be getting a lot done during this week, and that's just fine. But it felt like that time would be better to not have a graded check-in. So yeah, no, there's not one this coming Wednesday. Or not an official one. We can always check in on the stuff you're working on if you need feedback though. Okay. Other questions? Comments? Is there anything I'm leaving out? Anything you're wanting me to cover during this time, or feel like that we need to look at more in depth?
No,
Cool. Okay. So, in that case, what I'd like to check out today is a couple of things from this shot. So, I recognize that, I think I said, like, the balance that I have for my shots is usually probably about 2/3 of it is that blocking plus process. The last third is splining, right? And so I'll be honest, I don't have this as finished blocking as I would really like, but whoa, it's way too fast. But I do have sections of it that are working okay. So let me set my playback speed to real time so you can see where we're at. Really, the parts that I'm missing right now is my breakdowns on my sneak. Right, I have a couple of them where I have all of the poses that I want for the sneak. Really, mainly just this one is sort of the big jump that I want. I wanted to kind of do like this kind of little hop sneak all the way through. And I don't have all of the keys in there for that. But what I do have is most of the keys for this section through here, right, to make this look right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, when you get to that point, when you've blocked it enough, and then you have to choose to go to spline, right? So as it is right now, if I were to select my entire character, I doubt it kept my control. Nope. Now I go in here, on the bottom here. This is bad guy. Control set. I would choose that first. Hold shift, choose that. So that's my picker, right? And the one thing you'll notice is, like, while I'm doing this, everything has a key on it, right? No matter what it is, like, that is one of the big elements of blocking and blocking plus is that I'm setting a key on everything. And everything is on the same frame, right? If you look here in my timeline, everything has the key on it on frame 1. Just to make sure of that, and this is actually, for me, pretty important before I go much further, I just go through and step through it and hit S, right? So I use the greater than, less than keys to skip back and forth between keyframes, and then just hit S when I'm on them, right? And I just want to make sure that everything is keyed, right? This will just make sure that, like, when I did my blocking through here, I locked it down, right? Like, there's a chance that no, let me back up. By not doing that, like, I am not 100% sure, if I don't do that, that this pose was all my decision, right? Like, some of it may have been chance. Some of it may have been that I didn't adjust. Like, on frame 58, that pose may be happening because of something I did on frame 53 and 70, and this is just the natural transition through that, right? Which means if I adjust 70, it messes up 58, right? So by nailing all of that down, I know, no, this is all baked in there. That is all like a a hard keyframe that is delineated or determined by a keyframe, right? So next step for me is when you go to splining, right? So the reason people say that go to splining is because originally you would do this in stepped mode where there were no in-betweens, right? Like that you would only see your keyframes, right? And then going to splining mode means that you went into your graph editor and you said, no, make all of these transition, and that's where you would get your blends here, right? So let's see if I can figure out a way to frame this in a way that will make sense for you all to see it. I don't need this anymore. So what I'm probably going to do is layouts. I usually do 3 panes, split top. That looks good. And then I can go panels and then make this one my graph editor. All right. There we go. This should be easier to see now. So a couple things that I want to do before I jump into all of these curves, right? So this is like what my graph editor looks like. It's actually pretty interesting to see. Like you can almost see the beats that happen here, right? Like all of this is before he is on camera. And then this is where he gets onto camera and kind of hanging out here looking around, right? And then this slow growth through here is that lunge forward, right? But this is obviously a mess, right? Like this, although we can kind of see what's going on there, there's no way I could just be like, oh, I gotta grab this and move it, right? I'm gonna have to go through there and start editing these curves in the same way you did with like the bouncing ball or anything else. I really feel like I shouldn't have to say this at this point, but just to make sure, the graph editor is never optional, right? Like I don't think it's possible to get a job in animation without using the graph editor daily, right? So, or at least in character animation. I mean, maybe like effects animation, you may not open it up as much. You still will open it, right? So if you're still kind of iffy on the graph editor, still not feeling super comfortable in it, this is where I would say push yourself on this. So I have all of these windows up for a couple reasons. Wait, before I go there, let's do some prep. I'm going to go in here and start editing these curves, so I want to make sure that I have all the tools and that the curves are displaying or transitioning in a way that makes sense, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is select all of my curves. So I'm going to highlight all of those, right? Make sure every possible channel that has a keyframe on it is selected. I'm going to select all the keyframes for those. And then I'm going to hit this button right here. This is going to make sure that everything is in auto tangent. By default, it probably is, but just in case, let's do this and kind of watch your tangents and see if anything changes. I didn't really see very much change, but it may have changed some things, right? With auto tangent, I can predict pretty reasonably what is going to happen there, right? How those transitions are going to work, right? Just to kind of look at one here. Do I not have any of those on the screen? Apparently those aren't keyed. There we go. So what auto tangent here will do, just so you kind of know about this, is that if there is a keyframe before or after it that is the exact same value, it will flatten that tangent. If the value before or after it is different, then it will smooth it, right? So if I move this, you'll see how the tangent kind of changes, right? Versus if this were a flat tangent, it would stay the same, right? And so when I do that on auto, I can predict what it's going to do, right? the same with this, right? This tangent is smooth because it's in this transition between these two. And you can see that as I go to flat, it flattens back out, right? So that is really all I'm doing by setting those to auto. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to select everything again. Select all my curves. Hit this hit this button right here to sort of frame all of them. And select all of my keyframes because there's a couple other things I'd like to do to these curves. I'd like to go to curves and set these as weighted tangents. So how you can tell if something is weighted or not is the little indicator at the end of the curve, right? If you zoom in here a little closer, you'll see that most of these have these little triangles at the end, right there. That means that they're non-weighted. But if I go to curves and choose weighted tangents, I get these little boxes on the end. Right? Now, all those little boxes are allowing me to do is pull these out or push these in. All right, so it gives me a little bit more control. If they're not weighted, if I go back to before we switch there, you'll see if I grab this, all I can do is change the angle of it, right? But if I set all these to weighted, then I have a little bit more control of how I adjust those tangents, right? And then there's one more thing I'm going to do just because I haven't done this yet on this computer. This is something I usually just have set on my computer. Is I'm going to create a new shortcut key that I use because a tool I use a lot in the graph editor is this add key tool right there. And I don't want to have to keep going to the menu for that. So I usually assign that to a shortcut key. I'm going to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Hotkey Editor. So I'm going to open it up. And then I'm going to choose Editors, and then the Graph Editor. And it's usually pretty high up this list here, this Add Key tool. So all I have to do is select that, and you'll see that I get this little area out here to type. I usually use the T key. Now the T key does already have a purpose in here, right here. It's to like frame your selection or something like that. Frame center view. So that means like wherever your slider is, it'll frame the entire graph editor to that. That's useful, but there's a button for that, and I use that way less frequently than I use the add key tool. So I mean, if there's another key that you like better, maybe P or something like that, that's fine. But for me, I'm just going to use T. It's going to give me a warning. It's already been assigned. I'm like, I don't care. I'm the boss. Save and close, right? So let me show you what that actually does. Really? These don't have keys on them? What am I looking at here? Here we go. We can see this. So what this shortcut key does is if I hit T, you'll see I now get this little crosshair. And if I select this curve in some way, so I select this keyframe, then I can middle click and add a key wherever I want to. And if I hold down middle click, I can still continue to move it and then release it. So the reason that's beneficial for me is because then I can literally just draw my curves out, right? I can do whatever I need to with that middle click. Okay? It's a very fast way of being able to edit these curves. So pretty much now with these settings, I can go through here and edit a curve using just the W and the T key and occasionally R for scale. In case you were not familiar with this, if I grabbed all of these keys and hit R, I can scale that whole curve up from the middle, right? That is a way to increase or decrease like intensity of something, right? Okay, so now we have these tools ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and increment and save so I have a copy of that. So I think the hardest part about splining is knowing like where to start, right? All of these curves are ugly, right? Like they're all and this is the part that people just don't believe. You literally have to look at all of them, like every one of them. Some of them you can make a decision very quickly if that needs anything changed to it. But I will literally go through every curve for every control on this entire character. I remember, like, there are certain, like, moments in my life in becoming an animator where I had revelations of things, right? Like I remember I was doing an animation of a bouncing ball with a tail. I was getting feedback from somebody, and they said, you can't just let the controls do the work. Even after you've splined it, even after you've like offset everything, you have to be the one that does exactly what you want that, or makes that tail do exactly what you want it to do. You're the animator. And that was one of these moments where I realized process isn't everything, right? And I just suddenly, like, that was a turning point of when my animation suddenly started getting better, right? You may already recognize some of these things from your life, of when, like, it was a struggle and then something clicked and you're like, oh, I get it, and your animation and your work just got better, right? If not in animation, you probably recognize it in some other skill. One of the ones that probably took me from not competitive work to competitive work, like work that I could actually get a job with, is when I realized that people weren't joking with me when they said you literally have to adjust every curve. It's not a like every curve. You have to think about what every control is doing. And I think those are two big takeaways for me. Is you have to be in control of what everything is doing, and to do that, you have to look at every curve in some way or another. Which sounds like a chore when you're not comfortable in the graph editor. But once the graph editor just becomes another tool to you, like once you can glance at this and kind of understand what information you should take away from the graph editor, like when I grab the hips here, right, and I recognize I'm on my translate X, like my eyes don't even have to slow down on this curve, right? I understand what this is telling me, right? Once you get to that point, then this just becomes another user interface for you, right? Just like it probably like took you a little while from at the beginning of using this rig to realize that this right here is for controlling the fingers, right? This little yellow thing that's around there. Now you understand that, you can just grab these and make changes to the fingers, right? But before that, like, you didn't understand how to use that interface. Like once the graph editor just becomes a user interface to you, then you get to focus on all of this in terms of performance and detail, right? And for me, like, that is something that when somebody says you have to look at every curve, that's not daunting anymore, right? I recognize that there are, 3 curves for each finger, but I can look at those very quickly and I can edit them in bulk with this user interface. And that's only going to take me like, maybe a minute in the animation progress or process. So you have to get comfortable with the graph editor, and you literally have to edit all of those curves, right? Every curve for every control. So I've hammered on that enough, but once you acknowledge that, the question becomes, well, which one do I start with, right? Like where do I start? Do I start at the feet and work my way up? Do I start at the detail stuff and work my way to bigger stuff? Do I start with bigger stuff and work my way out? So I think I shared a video with you all. I don't remember if it was in the last class or if it was in another class or anyway, I think I shared it with y'all somewhere, and if not, it's pretty easy to find. It's the inside-out method of skinning, which is starting at the root joints and working your way out to smaller things. That's how I go about animating or cleaning up my splines as well. So I had this open, but I have lost it. Let me find it here. Oh, apparently that's not it. Let me go ahead and open it again. I may have closed it down. So I made a splining checklist. It's basically what you should look at or what you should be paying attention to in the splining process, right? This will take you from blocking plus to being finished. Okay? And I can share this somewhere if you don't want to write it down, or if you want to take a screenshot of it now while it's full screen, whatever works for you. So this is the order in which I go through an animated shot. I start with the root movement, right? The root being, in this case for our character, that main cog that controls the hips, right? The root in this character's case is this blue thing, right? Because this controls so much of the body. Like really everything is affected by this except for the feet's location, right? So I start with that. Where did it go? Oh, it's opening it with edge. No wonder I couldn't find. So I start with that root movement, right? I'm going to edit all necessary curves, which I'll show you how my process for that here in a minute. And then I'm going to check the relationship between that root control and the feet. And then I'm going to offset as needed, okay? So when I say offset as needed, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that foot is on the ground. So if our character is shifting their weight, right? Let me move this over here and talk about it. So if I were doing an animation of my character shifting his weight from over here to over here, and he was picking his foot up, right, in that process. In fact, let's do this. Let's copy this pose. And I'm going to go way out here. And we're just going to do that animation really quick. Oh, that's not it. So if I were going to animate my character going from here to raising his foot, I don't have auto key turned on. What is happening? So that's the other thing I need to do is turn on auto key for me. To this, right? I'm trying to animate my character shifting their weight over this leg. So you'll notice that looks wrong, right? And the reason that looks wrong is because the character is shifting his weight over, but we know, if we think about physics enough, we know that the reason this control is moving to the side is because this foot should be pushing against the ground, right? It's what's pushing it over, right? The foot is pushing against the ground, that drives the hips over. And what we see in this animation is that foot raising off the ground as the hips go over. And we say, well, what's pushing it over then, right? We need some evidence that this foot is still pushing against the ground. And so when I say offsetting keys on the feet, what I would do is grab this foot control and I'll say, no, just don't raise up that early, right? I would keep that foot on the ground longer. Right? Actually, let me do that differently. That way we get that one holding it down, right? And so now that foot stays on the ground and pushes it over and then picks up, right? And I can adjust that to make that feel more appropriate, right? So that feels better than when it was raising up at the same time. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Okay. If you have questions anywhere along the way, slow me down, ask. Like, this can be a conversation. So after I've adjusted the root movement, adjusted the root curves, and adjusted the relationship between the root and the feet, I offset that to make sure the weight shift looks good. Another time when we do that is like if a character is moving forward and they have to catch themselves with that foot, right? that foot needs to get out there a little earlier than their hips, right? You kind of got to get that foot out there to catch yourself and absorb that weight. And then I would edit all the necessary foot curves, right? So really, if we're looking at editing of the curves, what I'm doing first is this control, these controls, right? And making sure that the relationship to that for how the body mechanics is working is correct, right? That is the largest part of making body mechanics believable, right? We know as people who live in this world that gravity is always pulling on you. All of the other forces, friction, drag, like all of those things are happening in the world around us, right? And really what we have to do for body mechanics is make sure that these weight shifts make sense, right? Make sure that the legs and the hips are doing what is appropriate in order to make the physics of the world believable, right? That is the foundation for all the rest of your character animation. If that's not believable, even if it's an acting shot, then the audience they're not going to suspend disbelief and trust your shot, right? So I want you to recognize like that is the essence of the character you did in Principles of Animation, right? A set of hips and 2 feet, right? So we've been practicing trying to make that look believable since your first semester here. Animation fundamentals, BenBot is a hips, 2 feet, and a set of arms, right? Really, all this character is a hips, 2 feet, a set of arms, and a spine and head, right? Once you have that, everything else is just secondary motion, right? Fingers, like hair, this hat, like his eyes, all of that stuff is secondary, little nuanced stuff that we can add, right? But that's where all the physicality comes from, is from those different elements, right? So, okay, so we've got this base part of the movement here, right? The root motion, the feet, and how those react to each other. That's going to give us most of what we need to know about the body mechanics. This next section here, after we're done with that, I work my way out from the root, right? So the root affects everything. I'm going to work my way out to smaller and smaller elements as I go from there, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is work my way up the spine and torso, right? I'm going to edit all necessary curves on the spine control, working up the spine, particularly if this is an FK spine. In this case, this character is FK or IK, but it still makes sense. So like I would sort of control or edit those spine curves as I go up. And then once I get to the top of the spine, I just keep going. I go on up the head, right? Sometimes I'll hold off a little bit on the head if I know there's going to be some nuance to some little stuff, but usually that's when I adjust the head curves. Sometimes I'll put the head curves off till after the arms. So assuming the arms are in FK, which for most people they probably are, I would work down the FK controls of my arms. If they're in IK, you still spline the IK curves, right? So I'd start with the shoulder or the clavicle, work down to the shoulder, to the elbow, and then to the wrist, right? And if you think about that part of the arm, that's just a pendulum, right? That is a pendulum reacting to whatever the spine is doing. The spine is actually just a pendulum, like a vertical pendulum reacting to whatever the hips are doing. And so I just sort of work my way out through all of those curves and make sure those curves are doing what I want them to do. So at that point, I'm offsetting by small amounts maybe, like I'm shifting keys side to side and stuff, but I don't know what my video is doing. I'm shifting keys from side to side and stuff like that, and like I'm not maintaining them all on the same keyframes as each other, but I haven't in mass offset anything, right? I have everything for the most part is still kind of in the same timing. And so that's something we have to think about in terms of lead and follow, right? So with the pendulum, we knew that the platform was leading the motion, and the hierarchy down that down the pendulum was reacting to it, right? So the pendulum was leading, the arm was following and reacting to it. And so that's really what we're doing with this offsetting pass, right? And I just sort of check what needs to be offset. So one of the things I'll check is, do I need to offset my root translate keys from my rotate keys? And that's something that often is the case. Like, my translates usually happen one frame before the rotates, right? Or like the translate and rotates on that root control, just they're going to go one way or the other. It's probably not going to be in mass that I shift all of the keyframes one frame or another. It's like in sections of it. If I could sort of back up and do an example, right? Well, I won't show this yet. I'll show it here in a minute. So the next thing I would go through is offsetting the spine and head controls to show lead and follow. So when I say lead and follow, you all can kind of see my camera right now, right? When I say lead and follow, just to make sure, I'll stop this so you can see it. When I say lead and follow, I'm talking about what part of the body is leading, what part is following, right? So with that pendulum, usually the platform was leading, the pendulum below was following, right? Unless you wanted that pendulum to seem like it was reaching out and trying to grab something. And in that case, the arm may seem like it's leading, and then the platform follows that, right? So I can get back here and show you. Like, me raising my arm, if I want my hand, or if I want my shoulder to lead and my hand to follow, it may look like this as my arm comes up, right? But if I'm doing, there's an alternative to that, which is my hand leading that motion, and that's going to look like this, right? And so how I would do that is offsetting keys. Like, that's at least the first step. It's not the last step, but I would, if I want my hand to fall or to lead, I would have my hand keyframes happen first. I could shift those back, or I could shift my elbow and my shoulder later, right? To where my hand starts to rotate before my elbow starts to move, right? So I get this first, elbow next, shoulder next, right? Versus the other, which is shoulder first, elbow next, hand next, right? And so this happens all throughout the body, right? So for a good example of this, if a character is really eager to look in this direction, their head may go first. Actually, their eyes would go first. Their head would go next. Their chest would go next. And then their center of gravity would go, right? Versus if they were feeling kind of lethargic or tired, maybe their hips go first, then their spine, and it's like their head goes last, right? So is that making sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let me, I just saw that Michael was here. Kim was here. Did John ever show up? Nope. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead, well, not cool, but questions, or does somebody have a question?
Yeah, would you mind explaining that offset one more time? Because I have some trouble with offsets.
Yes, actually, I'll show you in just a minute when I start to edit the video, or when I start to edit the animation. So just kind of working down this, offset down the arms as well. So when I'm talking about offset, you'll notice if I grab all of these controls here, right? And let's do it right here. This is a good spot to show it. All right, that I have my character's arm here in this pose, and then the next pose, it's here, right? And so if I want my shoulder to lead, I want those keyframes to happen first, right? So what I could do is, I have all three of these selected. I could just select the second two, right? And I could have those happen one frame later, right?
I see.
And then I could deselect my elbow to where I just have the wrist, And I could have that happen 1 frame later. And so now if I select all 3 of those, you'll see it can, that we get this sort of lead and follow. It's not extremely exaggerated here. That's one of the things it's because I kind of offset the wrong section, didn't I? But you'll see that like there's a little bit more lead and follow during this section here. This is all about like that overlapping action part of it. Let me try this again. Yeah, let's just offset.
I think I was also thinking it.
Yeah, so really it's offset on the timeline, right?
Okay.
So you'll see now that arm kind of unfolds a little bit more. Now it's not going to do everything for me, right? Like if I really want that to look like a big unfold, I would still have to adjust a couple of other things. And like for me, I probably need another keyframe in between here. So I may manually set that here in a minute. So I'm going to offset the arms to show lead and follow, right? So again, if I wanted the arm to raise to show lead and follow, it would be the opposite. I would have the hand rotate first, then the elbow, and then the shoulder, right? And so I would offset those those keyframes in the other direction. And then one of the other things I usually do is when you're posing your character, if you can see me in the camera here, a lot of times it's very easy to poses like this, right? And there's a term that animators use for that called twinning, which is your character is doing the same thing on both sides, right? Even if it's not the same pose, even if it's something like this, right? If they hit it at the same time, that feels like you can almost feel where you set the keyframe, right? And so one of the things you can do is just offset the entire arm to happen like a frame later, or maybe even 2 frames later, so you get something like this, right? Like it's a little bit different. So I will do that some just to mix it up if I can see places where it feels like I'm twinning, or like really what this offsetting pass is doing is trying to loosen stuff up so it doesn't feel like everything is hitting your key poses at the same time, right? So I also feel like it's worth mentioning that you don't have to, like, I think some people think once I get in the graph editor, I can't move anything in the viewport anymore. Like that's not allowed. Like you can do whatever you want, right? Like sometimes I will be offsetting stuff and I'll be like, you know what, this isn't working. I'm just going to go in there and manually key that entire section to get something more refined, and then come back into the graph editor and fix that, right? Some of this is bouncing back and forth in the viewport and the graph editor. Like anything goes, right? So this is the level that most people make it to, right? Hopefully you can make it to this point. Really, in all honesty, most people in class make it to like this section, right? Offsetting really loosens stuff up. Very rarely do I get to see people make it to this section. And so that's one of the things by giving you this extra time that hopefully you'll be able to get to some of this stuff, this polished stuff, right? This is the stuff that that you hear us talking about in portfolio when we're like, this still needs more polish, this still needs more refinement. So, some of the elements that go into this, adding detail motions in the head where needed. So one of the things like that is like your head does a lot of like small nuancy stuff, right? Especially like in lip sync or when your character is making noises. Like if your character says a word slightly louder than another word, sometimes you will see that loud noise in their head, right? Like they'll like bob their head up a little bit when they say a word a little louder. And so I'll go in and make sure that the head has enough texture, because the head can start to feel floaty if it doesn't have enough texture. I'll add detail animation in the hands where needed. So that's like if your character is like making these subtle little hand gestures or something, like your fingers will feel very stiff in your animation if you don't add just a little bit of that. One of the tricks that I'll do in animation is if my character is going from like, the hand pose is posed, and then they go over here, and I really still just need the same hand pose. What I'll do is I'll put a breakdown in the middle there that's different, right? Like right in the middle of this, I'll drag the fingers back or something, right? And that way it can go from the same pose to the same pose, but it'll feel like that, right? It'll feel looser. Offset your fingers for lead and follow, like no joke. All of your fingers don't close and open at the same time. If they did, it feels very robotic, right? If you look at how your fingers work, your index finger unrolls first, and then your middle finger, and then those last two are kind of together, but still kind of led a little bit by the ring finger as you open your hand, right? So as you open your hand, it uncurls that way, right? As you close your hand, it does the opposite. Your pinky goes first, and then it closes in on your index finger. So like you can do some stuff like that and offset entire fingers. You're going to double check the curves to eliminate noticeable pops. So when I say curves, I'm also kind of talking about arcs, right? So like if my character is moving their arm around, what I'll do is I'll grab like the tip of their finger, I'll grab their hand, and I'll put an editable motion trail on that so I can see what the motion trail is, and then I'll make sure that that arc is clean. So a lot of times in animation, if a character is moving their arm across, and you'll see like this little like hitch down on one frame and then back up, and what that reads like is like a twitch right in the middle of it. And so little things like that, that is some of the stuff that we can fix on those little bitty hiccups, right? And that's what I'm talking about here. Arc track the head, the nose, the arms, legs to assure clean arcs, right? So this maybe isn't going to be as important in this, but add any detail contact information, like your fingers squashing or on contact. A good example of that is like when you grab something. I don't know if you can see this as well. My phone is an example. Like when my finger touches my phone, if you can see in the video, it doesn't just like touch and my finger stays the same. My finger will change. Like it'll like crinkle a little bit, it'll like curl the end of it. Like I can feel that contact happening. That is something that is usually really missing in amateur work or non-professional work. And then the last thing here is like eye darts and other fine detail. So eye darts are if your character has eyes, which in this case it does, but they're not super detailed eyes. Your eyes never stop moving, right? They will land on something and they'll stay focused on them. But even if you're like focusing on something in your screen right now, you're probably not just staring at like the tip of the letter T, right? Like you're bouncing around different letters. Even if you're looking at somebody's face, like your eyes bounce from their eyes to their nose, back to their eyes, to their mouth, to their eyes. Like your eyes are constantly darting around. And they do it really quickly. An eye dart from like one pose to another usually doesn't take more than 2 frames. It's a really quick little twitches around that your eye is doing all the time. So all of this stuff here, this is the stuff that gets you hired, right? This is the stuff here. Let me rephrase this. This is the stuff that the average Joe will notice watching the animation, right? This is the stuff that somebody who is like really into animation would notice watching the animation. This is the stuff that only animators can put their finger on and say, that's not right, right? That needs some more work. So you do this last part to get a job, right? And that's, and other animators do it to kind of hold themselves accountable to making good quality work, right? So that's one of the reasons I always push for this. I always try to push for this polish pass, and that's why you hear us go on and on about it in Portfolio. So, all right, let me sort of show you quickly how I edit just 1 or 2 curves here. I'm not going to do too much of this. And I'm also going to sort of focus in a little bit on a section. So and this is one of the methods that a lot of people will do. I have 151 frames to clean up here, right? What a lot of people will do is say, okay, I'm going to make this first 58 frames perfect, right? And so they'll just go in here and just look at that first 58 frames of animation, right? You can see that it kind of blocks it off in here. I can frame that. And then I just have to edit the curve on these first 58 frames. Some people do it that way. Some people do the entire thing. I'm just going to kind of focus in here on an area just so we can kind of look at how the curves work on some of this. So usually what I'll do, I'll keep my camera up here so I can see how it looks in the final render, and then I'll keep my perspective view and I'll find the first curve I'm going to edit, my translate X. Now, off the top of my head, I don't necessarily know if translate X is my side to side or my up and down. But if I test it, I grab these curves, try to move them, it's side to side, okay? So I'm going to grab all of these, frame that, and I'm going to position my camera where I can just pay attention to the side-to-side motion on my character's hips as he moves in, right? And so you'll notice some stuff in here, it's just kind of simple, right? Like right here is perfectly flat, right? There's no side-to-side translation during that time. And I don't think that that makes sense, right? So I'd sort of soften that in. I know this is off camera, but I'll probably still like ease in just a little bit. And so what I'm getting is he takes this step over to the side here, but then for some reason he starts to go back in the other direction here, right? So that doesn't really make sense to me because there's nothing that would be pushing him back in that direction. So I would maybe go ahead and continue to let him go this way a little bit more. And then after he gets closer to the wall, then he would push himself back. Let's see how that looks. A little too much. And maybe I don't need him to push himself back that much anyway. Now, of course, at this point, I can start editing my curve's location, so I don't have to keep it all locked in. This is sort of the breaking point now for me of when I can start to shift stuff from side to side. And then he kind of settles into this pose. From here, I have him do this like look over to here. And so you'll notice he starts to turn his head, and then the hips go, right? I'm all right with that. I maybe will go ahead and pull that in a little bit more, and I'll ease in a little bit here, right? So those were all really small changes, right? And if I were to hit play and watch that, I am going to see almost no noticeable difference, right? And that's one of the things that's very frustrating for most people on splining, is that it feels like you're doing a lot of work for very little payoff, right? Has anybody ever heard of the 80-20 rule?
There's a lot of different things called the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, you're right, there are. The 80-20 rule, in terms of...
Sorry, that sounded rude. I didn't mean for that to sound rude.
No, you're right. No, but there's a... you're right, because there's... I think that there's a reason for that, really. But a lot of people will use the 80-20 rule in terms of talking about the amount of work, in that like it takes 20% of the effort to get you 80% of the way there, right? It takes another 80% of the effort to get you that last 20%, right? And I think that that's what we're seeing here, is that like it feels like a decreasing return of how much effort you're putting into it to how much return you're getting. But again, that's what is going to make your work stand out. That's what is going to make you seem like a professional, right? That's why Pixar is not saying, it's close enough, let's just stop there, right? Like they keep pushing it. But you're right. Actually, there are some other 80-20 rules. I actually believe that it probably has something to do with like the golden ratio or something like that. But you also see 80-20 used in detail to like cleanliness of something. Like you don't want something totally covered in noise, and so you can use a different ratios of stuff. But so when we're seeing this, like it's going to feel like you're doing a lot of work for not a lot of increase of quality. This is where it can start to feel a little frustrating and like I don't have time for this. I'm just going to stop, right? And I'm encouraging you not to do that. Like I'm encouraging you to go ahead and push it to that 100%. And I think it's safe to say that you won't be a professional until you do, right? So I mean, I recognize that this may not be the semester where you feel like you can throw 100% at anything. That has to happen eventually, or you're just not going to be a professional at it, right? So I would encourage you to try it this semester. Like try to push for 100% polish, which means there's going to be a lot of this cleanup in the curves that's going to feel like you're kicking your feet and not making any progress, right? One of the things that's really helpful for me is to play blast and go back and look, because I can make these changes and hit play, and it's such a small increase in quality that it doesn't feel very gratifying, right? But if I do that for 30 minutes and then I play blast and go look at the difference between the play blast from 30 minutes ago to now, you'll start to feel it getting better. Like you'll start to feel it improving, right? Slowly you start to get an eye for detail to where you still feel that improvement happening. So that's just sort of my thoughts on that. So again, I did my translate X. I'll go down to translate Y next, right? And I always, again, I adjust my camera to where I'm going to get the best result from this. Translate Y is usually your up and down. It is, right? And so you can kind of see what I've done here is I'm trying to get this up and down for these steps as he's walking in, right? So I get this little dip in this step here as he reaches across with his foot, and then back up to his height there. So I can go in here, maybe clean that up just a little bit, right? So this is him going up. Maybe I would even start that a little lower. That's what that was like. That way he kind of steps up into this shot. That's kind of working too, because you almost feel him stepping down into the beginning of the shot, right? So I get like this, like down, up, down again, back up to there. So this is, for me, he's popping up here a little too fast, right? He reaches the peak before he's at the wall. And so I'd probably ease him in on that a little bit more. That's something else I would probably go in here and do. Windows, settings, and preferences. Make sure my time slider is affecting all of my update views. That way I can see it happening in both frames. And so you'll see him kind of step up into that. Maybe a little bit more like that. And what I would do is key this down like this. May even pull this step up a little bit more. Okay. And something I'm just kind of noticing here is this foot is way off, right? Like I have it there. And that's not really important to change, but I want to change it just so I'll know where that foot is supposed to be. So I would go in here in my Translate Y and put it out there a little further in this direction. Probably for that whole stretch. Now, of course, if you can see that foot, it's more important. But right now, it just kind of helps me make sure that I'm making the right decisions on the weight. Right. Okay. I believe that's close. It goes up right there. I maybe would ease them into that just a little bit more. And maybe consider even taking them higher on that. So again, just continuing to walk down this. I'm going to get, after I get this control done, and that includes your rotates on this. Like, that is actually a pretty important part of it. After I get that, I would go through and make sure the feet sort of line up with it correctly. I would work up the spine and up the head, and then down the arms, and then sort of finish off with the fingers and the detail work. Okay. Okay. Questions about the splining process?
Does every shot need like a thorough splining, even if it's just like I don't even say. Like, there was a shot in ours that we're not using anymore, but it was just for expression changing. It's obviously not as complicated as a character moving like that.
Mm-hmm.
It would still need such a thorough, like, combing through.
Well, so here's what I'd say. I think every one of them needs a splining pass where you look at all, if it gets from the neck up, you don't have to worry about splining the feet, right? But what I would do is, like, your eyebrows are going to need to think about, like, are they easing into that up pose, or are they like overshooting it and coming back? Are they leading the eyes? Are they following the eyes? Are they breaking out? So, like, every applicable controller will need a pass on it. Here's the thing that will become really quick for you. Like I said, every control needs something, but I didn't make very many changes to this control here at all. So I can go through those really quickly, right? And I can be like, oh wait, this is where I had him do that footstep. So the only real spot that I need it is how it goes flat right there, right?
Oh, I just noticed little spurs at his feet.
Yeah, and then I didn't rig those either, but that could be a cool, like, close-up shot. The foot stomps down and the spur, like, spinning still. Yeah. So a lot of these are going to be like, okay, this one doesn't really change, so I don't really have to spend too much time on that, right? That will bring up a warning I have, which is something like that control, like, if I click on that and I see no change on it, that's okay, right? Like, there are plenty of animations where I never really need to roll up on the tip of the toe, right? However, if I ever select this control or the spine or the head, and I see a section where all of these are like perfectly flat, right? Nothing is changing over time, right? That's almost certainly going to look bad, right? Because all of those parts, like, are moving and rotating in all axes at least a little bit, right? And so sometimes I'll do that. I'll be posing, but I'll forget to, like, add any curves to, like, one of the spine controls. And then I'll get into the graph editor and I'll be like, crap, I really just completely ignored that spine control. I can't believe that. And so what I have to do then is go in and make something happen on that spine control. I do it a lot on the pelvis. Like, sometimes I'll see these big sections here where nothing is happening on the pelvis, and there's a weight shift there. So almost certainly something would have really happened on the pelvis, right? And so I would be like, well, that weight shift, I would go ahead and just go in here and make the animation happen in the graph editor instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, you're right. Like, some animations are like you manage to do most of it in the posing, and your pass through all the curves go really quickly. And for some things may almost be like a cursory pass, right? If your character has an ear control, but like they're not doing anything with their ears, then you can think about that ear control for like half a second and see if it's something you need to add some work to. And sometimes it helps. Like sometimes stuff like that, like try it and be like, oh, well maybe when he moves his head, the weight of his hat changes and you do see just a little bit of motion on the ears. And it's worth spending a minute or two to add that, to really add that fidelity to it. But yeah, probably would not require as much fidelity as like this action shot where he's stepping into stuff. At the same time, there's also some shots that you will spend so much time keyframing that it's like you've already thought about all of those controls and how they're moving while you were posing. And so once you get into the graph editor, really what your work consists of is looking for weird little hiccups, right? Like, so it may be like at the level of fidelity you're doing in there is just making this transition a little smoother, right? Like that may be all you're doing because you spent so much time in the posing process that your graph editor is actually pretty clean, right? I think all of those are different workflows, and probably will change from shot to shot, and definitely will change from animator to animator. So, other questions? Or did that answer that question, actually?
Yeah, thanks.
Other questions y'all have? Okay. So, I don't think I'll have time to get to the motion capture stuff today. I do plan on getting to that Wednesday, and actually I have a motion capture has never been something I've been super excited about. I've had to do a little bit of motion capture cleanup for a couple of clients, but usually to me, motion capture is something that just takes away the funnest part to me, which is the blocking. However, I do think that when you're doing it on your own project, when you have this opportunity to add something to it, like you can start to see motion capture as this option to add something extra that you maybe, like in this shot here, I can very easily add a cowboy just walking down the street without having to key all of that, right? And so there's some benefits to that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time next class period talking about that. Today we got a little bit of time left. I wanted to show you something that may be beneficial to you, which is sort of the rendering part of this. So let me go ahead and open up Arnold Render View. Render. Do I have some lights in here? So I do. So
Environments have their own lights already?
I don't think so. They may come with a sky dome. All I did for this character to get his environment, I'll show you kind of quickly here. I put a sky dome on it, and actually instead of doing like an HDRI, which you could do an HDRI, I went to lights and I did physical sky. So I'll actually show you this kind of quickly so you can see this whole process if you're interested in doing some of this as a lighting pass. I'll go ahead and delete that for right now. Actually, oh, it's in my environment. Save. I'll show you in this really quick just by referencing it, bringing it on in the reference. So environment, reference. So the way I created this is I just went to Arnold, Lights, Physical Sky. I was going to make this physical sky, but it's really small right here in the center. I just scale it up for visibility reasons. It actually, you don't have to. You can leave it right there in the center of your scene and it still actually works correctly. Your physical sky has a couple of interesting attributes to it. It's a light, but it's also a type of like effect almost. It's like something mapped into it, right? So you have all the options for your lights, like the number of samples, right? Maybe we'll put that up to 3 or 5 or something. But if I hit render on it right now, it's going to render like kind of late in the day. And some of that is this AI physical sky here. So I can crank up my intensity on this. I think I have my intensity set at like 4 or 3 or something. Oh, come on. Don't crash.
Mine was threatening to crash earlier. Like, last week, I could hardly stay connected to a Zoom meeting, let alone a notebook PC.
Yeah. It'll come back. There we go. Okay, so like I can turn up my intensity of the sun here. Did I hit stop? Nope. This is working great. There we go. Okay, there we go. Stop. So I can adjust my intensity of the sun here. I could set it to like 4. I can also, like, this elevation is the elevation that the sun is in, right? And so 45 means it's like, for some reason, 45 means like straight up, like this is like high noon kind of. You can see by the way the shadows are casting. If I were to put this at like 90, it's a physical sun and sky, so it starts to add color to it as well, right? Like we could, is it 90 right, or is it going to be more like 180? We're going to start to get like this dusk or like sunset or sunrise element to it. So we can adjust this, and we can also, like, basically what we're doing when we're changing the elevation, we're changing the elevation of the, wait, am I doing that right? Yeah. We're changing sort of the elevation of where the sun is in the sky, right? Come on. There we go. So now I've made it more like sunrise or sunset or something like that, right? I'll go ahead and leave mine at 45. So the thing you may be noticing here on this is that I'm rendering with Arnold, rendering small, 960 by 540, and it's still taking somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 seconds a frame, right? If I were to convert this to a higher resolution render, like I did the 1920 by 1080, which is probably what you should be rendering at, this is going to start getting up there in terms of the amount of time it takes to render, right? So I wanted to show you something that was kind of a neat option, right? I'm going to go ahead and save this image. I think I can do it with, is it this button? No. Where's the button that saves my image? Is it this one? Store a snapshot. There we go. So hopefully this will work. If I go to my render settings here, right, this is rendering in Arnold. If I go to the Arnold renderer, actually if I go to system right here, you'll see that the rendered device that Arnold is using is the CPU. It's using your computer, right? It's using your motherboard, your RAM, all of that stuff, right? It's a software render. And a software render, it's like you can have a fast graphics card, but that's not necessarily what is using to crunch that information, right? Your graphics card is used to crunch like games, right? Video games, something that has to be rendered in real time, so it can take some of that processing power off of the rest of your computer, right? So Arnold has the option to do a GPU renderer, which is a graphics card renderer, a graphics processing unit. So if I click that and hit render, it's going to take it a little while to do the very first render, and that's because it has to convert some stuff. But a lot of stuff changed in this, and basically what it's going to do is Maya's going to try to render this whole scene using Arnold and your graphics card. Now, graphics cards are only able to do certain things, and so it's going to limit it a little bit, right? And we're going to see a little bit of a quality change. But not as bad as you might think. So let's see what this does here. Did that work? Yeah, it always takes like a little while to do the first one. Or to like, it's like it has to convert a bunch of stuff before it can do the first one. Working. Let's try stopping it and seeing if it will start it over. This is why I don't teach the lighting and rendering class. Rendering drives me nuts.
Sometimes when I mess with that GPU, I have to do like render update full scene, and that can help. But
Yeah, actually, it might not hurt to just do this. Is this what you're talking about, or is it?
I think it's under the actual like render tab in that window, but it might be working now.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
So now if I go to shot 1, it rendered that same shot in 2 seconds. So let me go ahead and save an image of that, and we can click back and forth and see the difference. So really the only difference is I'm getting a little bit more grain in the shot, right? But it's in the difference of 31 seconds and 2 seconds, right? Some of the things we can change in this, if I go to my Arnold renderer, check this out. Where we used to be able to adjust all of these numbers, now a bunch of those are grayed out, right? And the only real thing we got to adjust is this camera AA, right? Our render's going pretty quick, so I could try something crazy on this and go to like 5, right? Which is something like would be ridiculous to ever try. And I'm getting that render done. Wait, did that finish? It wasn't 2 seconds though. I don't know that that worked. Let's close that and try that again. So 8 seconds, we get this render. So we could compare those two. And really the difference in 8 seconds for this render, 32 seconds for this render, is not a lot, right? The other thing that I kind of discovered that was kind of handy is there's this adaptive sampling here. And I can set my adaptive sampling. And basically what this is it's not going to render the entire scene using 5 AA samples or camera samples. It's going to use a total amount or a maximum amount and sort of distribute those samples where it needs it. 20 is way high, right? Like I probably would never go that high on that. So I could try something like 5 on this. And that went pretty quick. Let's save that one. So 4 seconds to 31 seconds, right? Which I could probably also change this a little higher maybe. Let's try 6. See if that gets a little bit of that grain out of there more. Yeah, there we go. And so now I'm able to get a 6-second render versus a 32-second render, right? Now the reason this is working really good for me is because of this, right? These computers have these GeForce RTX 2080s, which was a pretty nice graphics card up until they released the 3080s, but it's still a good one. So if your computer doesn't have a gaming graphics card, you may not see a huge upgrade, or it may not even work with the GPU renderer. But having said that, you have a remote PC. And so that means that if you're wanting to try this, you could potentially log in and render with this remote PC in just like an hour or so. Let me see if I still have a test that I did. Oh yeah, this will be a nice little demo too, or a nice little preview too, because we're getting close to the end here. So I did a quick test the other day of this to see how long it would take to render using the hardware renderer for me. And this was on my computer at home, which is not as fast as these. It took me about 30 minutes to render this. So, just sort of a little plug. This is also this is one of the motion capture tests I did, right? So this was taking some basic motion capture, repurposing it, and doing some different stuff with it, right? So this is a motion capture clip, and then this shot rendered in, I think it was like 20 to 30 minutes. It rendered while I ate lunch, basically. Okay. So that's a lot of what maybe not that shot specifically, but that's a lot of what I'm going to be going over next class period. The GPU renderer, try it out at your computer at home. It may turn, like your computer may not be like this, this render horse, but it may give you some options to still render at home and get something a little bit better, or it may give you an option to where if you're having to log in through remote PC, you don't have to use the render farm, or you could at least render a little faster on a single computer. So, questions on anything we've gone over today?
I think I'm okay. I just need to.
This is being recorded, right?
I hope so. Let's see. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I got all that recorded. Okay, so
Yeah, because I feel like this is like really useful stuff, and probably gonna refer back to this.
cool. So the last thing I would say, just to kind of prep for next class period, I'll pull a new tab over here. So I'm kind of excited about playing around with some of this motion capture stuff, and I think that there's a chance some of you might really enjoy this too. If you want to start like looking at some examples of motion capture, we'll talk about how to get this into Maya in a bit. There is a Mixamo, Mixamo. It's actually bought by Adobe, and you'll have to sign up for it. I think I already have, but you just have to sign up for an account. Did that work? Just continue. And then once you do, there's tons of free motion capture in here. And by tons, I mean literally like thousands of clips, right? And it feels like there should be a catch, but there really isn't, right? And if I wanted to do a run, it brings up all these like run animations, and I can click on this. That's a backwards run. Run forward, and I just get this little clip of this guy running forward, right? I think can I pick a different character? I know you can pick a different character somehow, but there we go. Just so you can kind of see it on a different character. And then you go to your animations, and there's just like tons of them in here. It's a fast run, right? This is somebody like just running, right? You can do like, well, let me just go ahead and leave it on run just for a second to show you. Run. So this is the first page of run, right? There's at least 8 pages. If I go to page 8, yeah, so there's 8 pages of different run animations. And of course, some of them are like not really a run. Like for some reason, like there's this talking drum or this talking animation, right? But then like there's even stuff like limp, right? Like if I wanted to, I don't know why it's not. Maybe I should do injured. There we go. So here's an injured run. Injured walk backwards, right? So we can click through these and find motions that we like. And then what we're going to do in next class period is we're going to take one of these motions, we're going to pull it out of Mixamo, we're going to apply it to our cowboy character, and then I'm going to show you how to alter it to make it do a little bit more of what you want it to do, right? Recognize that all this is going to be when we're done is a bunch of keyframes, right? So there's some, I don't know how deep we can get into it, but there are ways where I could import in like 3 different motion capture clips and blend those keyframes together. Or I could, let's say I wanted to start off with this limp and then have my character like fall down, right? I could just bring in this limp as the beginning of my animation and then have the character fall at the end of it, right? So if you want to play around with Mixamo to see what some of these are, it's really not too hard there's other things you can adjust in this too. Like if I wanted to mirror this, so I was doing it the other way, I could. But there's some really cool animations in this, right? The landing on these always look too soft. I don't know what's up with that. What was that? Sorry. So yeah, feel free to. Oh, that was a good one. Maybe we'll do that one. That's fun. So yeah, feel free to sort of play around on these until you find some that you like. Because what we're going to do next class period is I'm going to bring these in and put them on the cowboy. So, all right. Other questions? Comments?
Nope.
All right, cool. So, just a quick refresher though. Not a refresher, but quick reminder. I did mention we're going to have that guest speaker. Heather's going to be with us on this Friday. Go ahead and spread that around. It's basically just going to be our class link, but I'm going to go ahead and post it to some of the Discord channels. I'm going to send it out to some of my other classes and stuff. I think it'd be cool just to have some guests come in. Like anybody who's interested in animation and wants to sit in on that, be fine. So.
Is that taking place during our normal class time?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be. We'll probably make it a little bit flexible. She may not be able to stay here the whole time, but she seemed pretty excited about it, so I think it'll be fun. So. And be thinking about questions you might want to ask her. That way we can. It's always more fun when you all have questions than when I have questions. So. All right, cool. Anything else y'all? Any other questions y'all have? Anything else you want to talk about? Once. All right. I'll go ahead and wrap the video up then and upload that to YouTube, and y'all have a good day. So.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.